Okay, everybody. Welcome to Kentik in Motion. My name is Brian Davenport. I'm a solutions engineer with Kentik, and this is episode one, or the first episode of Kentik in Motion. And we're going to be talking about Data Explorer in the platform. So for those of you that are unfamiliar with Kentik, Kentik can consume a lot of different protocols, right? From NetFlow. NetFlow is kind of going to be the focus of today's presentation, but certainly the system can take in things like SNMP, metric data, cloud log data. It can do synthetic transaction tests, right? There's a wide variety of different, protocols that Kentik works with. All is to say, it's really built to be a one-stop shop for enterprise or service provider engineers to answer any question about their network. And, for those of you that are familiar with the platform, there's certainly a lot of ways that the system can present data, right? From, network topology maps to insights, calling out, device traffic insights or, shifts in data or things you should be aware of, to dashboard level views of top talkers and like, here's something interesting about a device. All of these are what I would say are kind of layers of abstraction over the underlying data set in Kentik to make data accessible and easy to view. Now, having worked with NetFlow data for over a decade, I would say that Data Explorer is definitely the best way for you to do traffic analysis with flow data and pull things apart. And the reason I really like it is, there's always that one project you're working on or that one set of data that you might require, and you just want it in a certain way and you want to filter it. And if you're kind of restricted by a view, it kind of hampers your ability to really answer any question. And Data Explorer is what allows you to do that. And I hope, by the end of this webinar, you agree with me, right? Okay, so to get started, what I'm going to do is just show you inside of Kentik where to find Data Explorer. And this is the Kentik platform. So as you can see, there's a lot of different kind of layers of abstraction we're putting over the data. But if I click into Data Explorer, I get this time series view here of Data Explorer. And, okay, just making sure that we're live and everything's good here. So I get this time series view of Data Explorer. I'm not really sure what I'm looking at if this is my first time using the product, right? I have kind of this time series graph, and it's telling me I have my average amount of bits per second, and I'm looking at data sources and what does all this really mean? So I think to start and frame up our understanding to really start unlocking the power of the system, what we're going to do is just set a little bit of a foundation with, what NetFlow is, what's inside of Kentik, and then how I can filter and use this data, right? Okay, so here's just a sample, really simple NetFlow data set, right? And what I'm looking at is I have a router here. Now, this is going to be one of the three core concepts I think are very important when understanding Data Explorer. In Kentik land, we're going to call this a data source. Okay, so this is the device or data source that's generating telemetry data towards our system. And then just for a little bit of a primer with Flow, right, I have a client or source talking to a destination. And I'm going to just normalize everything to a Seven-Tuple of data. This is going to be uniform across whether it's NetFlow or sFlow or really any type of flow data. You're going to get these key fields in your flow record, right? So my source communicates to my server. I can see we have a device that it traversed in order to generate the traffic. I have my source interface I come into, source IP, source port, it's TCP traffic, destination IP port. And then notably, flow data will give me the octet delta and packet delta, or more normally would be the amount of bits and packets that were sent in the transaction, right? Now, this being TCP traffic, we of course get traffic in the other way, where I have my server responding to the client. And I'm just calling out that some things transpose here, right? My source IP originally is now the destination. It's receiving traffic back from the server. The interfaces swap positions, right? Now the server is coming back in. The source interface is over here now. And my destination interface change. And notably, I have some more bits and packets. Maybe this is a user downloading a file from a web server, so I have more bits as the traffic's coming back in. Okay, so just to add another layer in here, I want to add another concept of a site. right? So if we look here, we have the same web server here, right? And we have a user that is communicating to it. So our IP address has changed, and a couple things have changed. Our device is now a new IP address, and all the interfaces change. We have the same destination IP, but so on and so forth. This is, pretty basic stuff. So just stick with me, and hopefully it'll start to color in a little bit as to where I'm going with this. Okay, so we have our sample database, we have our device, we have all our data in here, and we can start to really understand what's happening in Data Explorer. So if we look here, I have this blank time series graph, and I want to help you understand what are we actually looking at. So the first thing to understand is that we have not selected a data source or any device that's generating traffic. We're basically saying, give me all the data back that the system knows about. And then there's really two other concepts that are fundamental to understanding Data Explorer. One is a dimension, and the way to think about a dimension really is it's a field, right? So it's one of these fields that you're choosing. And then filters, which we'll get to a little bit towards the tail end of this, which is basically like you want to select something specific about the data set you're looking at. So really, what am I looking at here? Well, I'm saying, give me all the traffic back. Don't group it in any way and order it by bits per second. So to add a little visual to that, right? What you're basically saying is, give me everything. Just look at the bits column, right? Aggregate it all together and output that in a graph. So I really have not done anything special here. Kentik is saying, here's exactly what you're asked for, which is everything. So this becomes a little more interesting when we start like selecting dimensions and grouping the traffic together, right? Okay. So to take an example of that, let's go back here and say we want to select a dimension. Now, I want to call something out as well. If we go back over here and we go a little bit more to the right, I called out something specific, which was a site, right? And the device that's generating the traffic. Now, part of the special sauce of what Kentik's doing is on the data enrichment side. And I want to call this out as I go to select a dimension, because if you were thinking, okay, so you said there's this 7-tuple of data that you can select from, and then I click this edit dimensions. Well, I do get a source, a destination, and a non-directional kind of columns that I can choose from. And, this should make sense as I have a source IP, I have a destination IP, and then we have a non-directional component of like protocol as an example. But to the right, we can see that I see something like a site, a source country, a source ASN, some BGP data like source AS path. And I want to highlight that because if you look at all of these different dimensions that you can select or fields you can select, it's way more than 7. And part of that is there's really 2 reasons that this is occurring. One is some devices can send more data than just the 7-tuple. Like a Palo Alto is a great example of that. They'll include like a layer 7 application in their flow record, as opposed to just the layer 4 transports. And then additionally, there's a wide variety of enrichment that Kentik is doing where, we might be looking up the source IP, which is public, and saying, oh, this resides to the US and it's part of this country, right? And you might be labeling traffic on your own to say if it falls within a certain subnet, well, that's sales and that's marketing. All of this is to say these are just columns that you're able to select from when you're running your reports inside of the platform, okay? So I wanted to highlight that really quickly as we build our first query inside of Kentik. All right, so let's do that. So we now understand what's happening when I'm looking at no data. And let's go and do a group by. Okay, so I'm going to still stick to all data sources, and I'm going to group the traffic together by just source IPs, right? So I'm going to be my engineer on the left here. I'm going to select this as a dimension, and we'll come into Kentik, and on the source side, we'll go and select source IP. And then hopefully you're able to follow along with really what I'm returning in this query, where I'm saying, give me all the traffic from every device on my network, and then group my results together by source IP. And if we kind of look at our diagram here, right, I'm collapsing. Now, what I would say is in our example here, I have 4 IP addresses, but I would expect when this report returns, right, what's going to happen is I'm just saying group it by source IP. So I have this source here is unique. But these are showing up twice, right? Because there's 2 rows in my sample database here. And I'm aggregating together the number of bits, or really collapsing these together. So in my return, I'm going to have 3 rows, collapsing these 4, 2, 3. And I get a single graph, which is going to show me my unique source IP addresses. Coming back to Kentik, what I'm highlighting here is all of my every data source that I'm sending traffic from, grouping my results together by source IP, and then I have no source IP should show up more than once, right? I have this is my group by, and I'm looking at the aggregate amount of bits that each is sending across all devices. So this kind of leads you to the next question is, well, I might want to know what destination IP addresses that these sources are communicating with, right? That's kind of a next logical step I might want to take in my data analysis here. And if we zoom out a little bit in this and go to the left, right, we'll see an example of what that's going to do. Now, if you're bearing with me just a little bit, right, I'm going to start leveling up what we're doing here in just a second. But I want to highlight one core concept is when I group it by source and destination IP, if the data set's exactly the same, I'm going to have more than 3 rows in my output. Now, hopefully I'm not saying something that makes complete sense here. It's like, okay, move on a little bit. But this is going to be an important concept as we start trying to figure out what's causing a traffic spike? What's the most interesting way we can group these results together to get to an answer? And what I mean by that is here, right, we're grouping by source and destination IP address. And if I look at my results, well, because I've added the destination IP address in as a dimension now, instead of just having 3 unique sources, right, there are 3 rows, I'm actually going to get 4 rows returned to me because this source IP communicates to 2 unique destination IP addresses, right? So this is going to start to build on a theme of cardinality, where the more cardinality or more dimensions you're selecting, it is going to widen your data set, and you should expect to see more rows in the data, right? And kind of you're splitting it apart more and more and more. So if we come over to Kentik, and we can kind of live that example in real life here, where I'll take my dimension selector, I'm going to edit it, and I'm going to look in. I have a blue destination side, which is great. And I'll go and I'll select destination IP addresses, and we're going to hit save. And then when this comes back, what we would expect to see, and I'm just going to notice I can hit this query pane and just to kind of collapse things out a little bit, just to give us a little more room to look at the results. And when our data comes back, what we're going to expect to see is likely a source IP address like this .201. Let's kind of highlight that guy, right? You can see that it's showing up more than once in our data set. Why is that? Well, I'm now grouping by the destination column and splitting the traffic out as opposed to what is the aggregate amount of traffic every source IP address sent, right? Or just grouping it that way by, let me see the source and destination pairs, right, throughout my entire network. But I'm still looking at traffic kind of with a wide lens, right? Where I'm saying, give me my entire data set back and group it by source and dest IPs. A more real world example may be you're having an issue at a site or you're having an issue by a device and you want to say what is the traffic that is consuming this device right now? Let me do some traffic analysis and figure out who's talking over a particular device, right? So if I come in here, right, and we're going to click on the selected data source section and focus on this first kind of core and foundational element of when I'm using the Kentik Data Explorer is you do not always, although the default view when you open it is all data sources, you don't have to be stuck in that view where you're kind of looking and filtering through everything, right? You can narrow that lens in a variety of ways. And this would be, I guess, the first of 3 key concepts inside of Data Explorer is, selecting a data source. So let's wipe our dimensions out here. I'm just going to hit clear selections in the bottom left. And then we'll start by picking a data source, right? So if I hit edit here, I'm going to uncheck all. You have to hit here. Now, notice I could select by type. So I could say give me all of my routers or all of my firewalls or give me all of my Amazon traffic, something along those lines. I could also label. So if you can label devices. If maybe your devices are in different sites, but they perform the same function, you could add a label and use that as a way to aggregate data. Site, again, we saw that originally where, devices live within sites. We can pick a site. But in our case, we're going to select just a device, right? So we're going to pick this Palo Alto device. And right off the bat, what you'll notice is my time series is going to change because I'm saying, just give me all of the traffic back from this particular device that maybe people are complaining about, right? So now, using the tools we've just gone through with how I can maybe group the results back together in order to get answers, we can start thinking about that with our dimension selector here. So I could take this time series. And I could say, well, I want to understand like what IP addresses. I'm going to do this like in a slow way. And actually, let me duplicate this out here, and then I'll show you really the pro way you can do it, or the faster way to do it with this analyze button. But, just to kind of like build on these concepts, I could say, well, I want to group my results together on this Palo by the source IP address, right? And so we'll see, is there a source that is responsible for this giant shift in traffic up, right? Now, likely what we're going to actually want to know is like, well, what destination is it communicating to? What application is it going, over? And we'll kind of do that iteratively as we build through this, query here. The other thing I would mention too, when you're kind of looking at this traffic, is you don't have to like select, wait for everything to render. And I'm really, always when you're doing a live demo, the query chooses to hang, even though you practice it a million times and it comes back really fast, right? Okay, so here, right, we see that we have this one IP address that is causing our spike in traffic. And, that is a good analysis where I can kind of see that quickly. But I want to know like, well, what destination and what's really causing this? So although this is a kind of a simple concept of, if you're a really professional Data Explorer user, I think it's good for people that are first learning this to say, well, okay, well, maybe I want to take this view and I want to look at both the destination IP address. And then because this is a Palo Alto device, I'm going to type in application here to highlight one other, foundational concept, which is you do have an application that Kentik will put into the database for you. And really what this is at layer 4, right? Because in that Seven-Tuple, we have a source port and we have a destination port. It's like, what was the lower of those two ports? Like 443 would be HTTPS, right? That kind of thing. Port 80 would be HTTP. But we'll see with the Apollo, they actually give us a layer 7 application in the flow record. So I'm going to go and I'm going to grab that and re-aggregate my traffic together, and we'll just let this cook for a second. And very quickly, we'll see, an example of what caused this spike in traffic, where, lo and behold, we have Apple updates kicked off at noon. And the point here is by understanding now, what a data source is, how I could narrow maybe my focus to a device I want to do some analysis on, and then how I can use dimensions in order to group those results back can very clearly and quickly give me an answer to what the problem is. Now, just as a little bit of a highlight for those that know how to use this, we have added, or for those who are like, man, I had to click a lot of things in order to see that. With any time series in Kentik, I will just highlight there is this analyze button. And what analyze is going to do, it's going to look at shifts in spikes in the time series, and then it's going to give you an explanation as to what happened, right? So here we can see this is from Apple. Here's the source IP, the dest IP. We can see the interfaces that the traffic is coming over, and it looks to be mostly, Apple update traffic that's riding over this. So you can quickly do it. But the purpose of this whole, presentation today is if you understand what the underlying data sets are in the system, then a lot of the abstractions, whether they're insights or dashboards or library views, will just make a lot more sense to you because you can kind of see how these things are being built. And then also you can go and iterate out them and, create your own views in the platform. Okay. So that is an example of kind of choosing a data source, which is going to narrow our focus. We've talked a little bit about what dimensions are, and then we're looking at our order by function of bits per second. So I'm going to shift the view or shift the pace a little bit, and we're going to talk about filtering the traffic, and then we're going to talk about additional metrics that you can choose to make, look at the data in more maybe interesting ways or different ways is probably a better way to say that. All right, so let's talk about filtering. So if we go back to our normal view, a common use case in that I see in, I'm just going to look, see if there's any questions here. Okay, no questions yet. A common use case in network engineering is I want to see traffic between two hosts, right? I have a source and I have a destination. People are complaining, and I want to look at all the traffic between those two hosts. So we go to our filtering example here. This is our first kind of view into adding a filter inside of Kentik. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go wide. Like, I don't know where these hosts are on the network. Maybe if you did, you'd choose your data source, but in my example, I don't. And I'm going to just group my results back by source and destination IP address. Now, if you think about dimensions as a group by function, like I'm saying, group my results in this way, think about filtering data as a where clause in your query. So you're saying, group the results by source and dest IP where it meets this criteria. And in my case, I'm going to be picking two different IP addresses, this 10.0.0.2 and 64 address. So coming down a little bit, what I'm really doing is I'm saying, if the source is 10.0.0.2, right? So my source is this, then the destination must be this .3 address. And if the source is this .3, right, then the destination must be this. So in this case, this 10.0.0.2 address, which is my source communicating to another destination, I'm actually not going to return those in my results, right? I'm also not going to return these in my results, right? So I'm just grabbing all of this data back. I have 4 different instances where I see this traffic, right? Multiple times. And then I would expect to get 2 rows back, right? The source to the destination, or kind of, I'd see this as a source communicating to that destination, and then the reverse and how much traffic is sent in each direction. So I'm a visual learner. That's why I put together these kind of graphics here. But to show this in Kentik, right? If I was to come here, I have a filter that is prepared for this. So we're going to go to Edit Filters, and I'm going to add a saved filter for Kentik in Motion. And then I just want to call something out about when you're adding filters in the system. So here, I'll just click Add Ad Hoc Filter and kind of go into a little more detail here. So when selecting a dimension, we noticed we had a source dimension that we could select, like source IP or destination, the blue destination. But notice when we're adding a filter, we can say source or destination. So we have this red selector where I can say, well, I want to know if it's a source or destination IP address. And that should become clear here, right? Because I want to say if this is a source or if it's a destination, right? I'm not selecting the column, I'm selecting my filters. So I'm picking it in this way. So here in my example, what I'm doing is saying, give me this as a source, this as a destination. We'll go and we'll say, or source or destination. We'll go ahead and save our results. And then all of our different, data sources have come back. So maybe I want to know where on my network do I see these host pairs? Like, which network devices is this traffic going over, right? Or what application is this using? And this is, as we build on these different topics, well, if I want to know what network devices these two hosts are going across, all I need to do is edit my dimensions. I have a non-directional dimension. A device is what exported the flow data, like where did we see it? And if I group my results together, I'm now taking this kind of default query and I'm saying, okay, across each network device, right? How much traffic are these host pairs saying, or like where on the network is it? And just to color this in, to give a little more example, what I'll do is I'll edit these dimensions and we'll add a source and we'll add a destination, right? And then we'll add these as filters or dimensions rather. And we'll see exactly what we would expect to see, right? So each device and then that source going back and forth over each particular device, we can break stuff apart, right? So there's my .9, there's my .206, and they're traversing each other back and forth across my entire network. So to summarize the three concepts we're talking about, a data source is going to be what is exporting the traffic to Kentik. A dimension is going to be how you want to group the results of your query back. And then a filter would be, a where clause, or basically, saying I want to see it only when it's these particular things. It's really what I want to match on. While I'm talking about filters, I do want to highlight one other, tip for those who use this platform frequently. You don't always need to come into your filtering here. So, and say edit filters to select one. Just a quick way to come and filter is in the results of the query. You'll see there's going to be 3 dots that you can click on each particular row. And this gives you an option if you want to include data in your query, if you want to exclude or omit stuff from your particular query. So let me kind of go back here. We'll remove this. I'm just going to clean up some of my views. All right. And then here, right, if I look at the source IP, hitting these 3 dots here, you have an include and an exclude. So let's just zoom in a little bit because that might be a little hard to see on that. But this is just a fast way. Once you start getting good with the system, you can kind of click. It's okay, I want to include this. And then if we notice down here, it's going and it's including this query for me, right? And I'll just apply that. And now I'm looking at only the traffic sourced from this. It's kind of a shorthand way to do it, similar to how the analyze function is a short way to do that. Okay, looking at the clock here, we got a little bit of time left. So the other piece that I think people that use this platform a lot that I really like to call out as you start leveling up how you're using Data Explorer is the metrics. So what I find often is customers, when they first start using it or experimenting with it, you're always looking at things in bits per second. It's our default view. It's probably the most common way a lot of people analyze traffic, like what is saturating a link, how much traffic is this application using, how much traffic between these two sites, so on and so forth. But I do encourage people to think about maybe data in a different way inside of the platform, right? So here I'm looking at all data sources and I'm filtering for a particular device. So I'm doing this for just to highlight one thing is, for those of you that are paying attention here, right? This query could have been simplified if I didn't filter for a device. I could have said, actually, what I want to do is look at a data source of this, right? And pick that device up here. So you don't need to add the device as a filter. You can select it. But, you can also filter postmortem, right? And kind of pick a device here. So I'll just remove this filter. Now, we're talking about the metrics, which in this case, I'm looking at bits per second across a device, but I want to show you how the story of a time series can change if you change the view of how you're, displaying your results. So we have some quick ways you can do this. You can look like number of unique sources, number of packets, number of unique destinations, source ports, destination ports. I'm going to go and pick the number of unique source IPs. And then notice right off the bat, I can start to see exactly what's happening with this particular device, right? I have a time series graph and the number of unique source IP addresses is coming, in bursts of up to 20K and then dropping off, indicative of like a denial of service attack, right? So it's just something I like to highlight of don't always think about coming into Data Explorer and just simply looking at bits per second. You have a lot of different ways you can look at the traffic by port or unique counts that are quite useful in the system. All right, so I'm going to go back to bits per second. We'll remove this, and then I'm going to kind of summarize this with a little way you can kind of simplify your experience in Kentik is, and why I think understanding the Data Explorer engine is so powerful is. If we wanted to come to Kentik and maybe get to that same spot via natural language, I'm just going to go to this AI advisor and I could say, show me my top source IPs across my network, right? So we can take a natural language query, right, and ask the system to go and retrieve this data for us. We're just going to go and query our top source IPs by traffic volume. And when you view these results, right, you can see in the upper right-hand corner, right, I have a view in Data Explorer, which I can click on and then jump right into the Data Explorer engine and take a look at precisely what the system used in order to build that query. And I find this is a good tool for when you're learning, how Data Explorer works. You have a natural language component where you can type your query in, get into Data Explorer, start seeing what you're looking for, and then alter the query because now we understand, okay, well, if I want to know what destinations and what application that these are communicating over, I can quickly add those dimensions in, maybe reorganize my data and and view the traffic in that way. So kind of using the natural language as a jump off point. Um, right. Okay. And then the last piece too is this is like, I usually save this to the end because it's very generally pretty easy to understand, but you do have a visualization type selector. So you can look at time series graphs, right? Your line graphs, you have your different stacked area charts, bar graphs to choose from as well. And one last thing to highlight before I pause for any questions that we might have is now that we understand data source, dimension, and filters, the last piece to really kind of grasp is the visualization depth. It's not a huge, piece to understand once the rest clicks, but it really is telling us how many rows. Um, okay, and we do have some questions, which is great. This is going to tell us how many rows from the table that we can pull in and visualize in the graph, right? So I like to highlight this because in our time series, just to pause for a second and kind of take a look at this, right? So we'll slow down for 1 second here. When I return this time series, I have a total overlay, which is showing me the total amount of traffic for whatever data sources or dimensions that I'm looking at, right? So here's my total view. And then I have all of my results that are graphed below. So I'm looking at what is the delta between what is graphed and all of the data that was returned. And I can see that there is a good amount of room between these two lines. Visualization depth is how many things from the table do you want to actually pull into the time series? The more you slide this over, the more traffic comes into the time series, and then the more, your delta between your total and your graphed results is going to change. Again, changing your group by function is going to also do that. Okay. So a question I'm reading is, I'd like to be able to change the metric to bytes per time, where I could adjust the time to second, minute, hour, day, week, month. Okay, so this is going to be, I think I understand where you're going with this. So let's just stick to, our source IPs here as our dimension. But if there's another way you'd want to do that, you can certainly select here. And then I guess it's a good call out. So thank you for the question. I didn't really cover the time range selector. So you do have a time range selector where I could go like last hour, 3, 6, 1 day, 2 days, last week, 2 weeks, 30 days. Let's go to last week. It's an example. And then if I understand what the question is for minute, hour, day, week, month, that's generally how you would change the time. The one other thing that's a little kind of, advanced, it's in the advanced section, is you can also tell the system how you want to aggregate your results back. So there are maybe I'll switch this to full for a second. Maybe you want to look at the results in like 5-minute averages where each chunk in the graph is like an average of 5 minutes, or you could say, give it to me in 1-minute averages or 30-minute averages. You can do that kind of thing. Let me know if that's the answer to the question you were looking for, of like how to change time, or maybe how you can aggregate your results a little bit differently. If I missed the mark on that, definitely feel free to clarify that for you. And then I guess just looking if there's any other questions here. Pause for a second. Oh, okay. How many? Okay. I see where you're going. So this is actually, I'm glad you asked to clarify this question. So the question really comes down to like what is the total amount of traffic that is being sent to an instance over the course of some time range, right? So in our example, let's actually just go back. Let's add these filters back in. Thank you for the question, by the way. Anybody that's presented before, questions always make your job presenting way easier instead of just talking, especially in post-COVID times, where you're talking to a camera in your room a lot of the time, right? But I'm just going to go and pick our two source and destination hosts, and we'll add some color to this question. So the question is, what is the total amount of traffic, right, that were sent between two hosts over the course of some time range? So here, I'm looking at the rate at which these source and destinations were transferring data, right? So the amount of bits per second over a time range. But I might want to know, how much data did they send? What was the total amount of traffic? And this comes into, an interesting way you can manipulate your metrics. So what I'll do just to visualize this, I'm going to change this to a table just to kind of focus in on our view here. And then if I go to, instead of hitting this drop down where I'm selecting like from a pre-selected, we can actually say I want to customize the metrics, right? And I'll hit clear selections. So again, a lot of options here. I think good for unlocking the power of Data Explorer to understand all the different things you can choose. But I can choose the total amount of bytes, right, as a metric as opposed to the rate at which traffic was transferring. And then what I'm doing here is pulling my results back and I'm looking in the last hour, right? How much traffic these two transmitted. And I could do that in week, I could do that in month, I could do that in day or whatever. I can see, basically this guy is pulling way more traffic down than this. So probably the client server relationship where it's making a request and then receiving a bunch of traffic back down. Total metrics are super useful, not only for looking at bytes, just so I'm on totals. One other way I really like to use this is if I look at, let's just group by source IP, as opposed to looking at like the rate of the number of unique destinations, right? So something like do a graph here. Still kind of interesting to look like over time, the number of unique destinations. When I filtered on one, I'm like filtered on one IP, no results here. So again, just to slow down for a second, I'm saying give me all of my traffic back from every data source, right? So everything that's exporting traffic. Group my results together by source IP. And I'm saying order my results where instead of bits by second, order it by who's communicating with the most unique destination IP addresses. So I see this one guy off the top is probably doing a network scan or something is pretty interesting about this. But you can just see how changing that metric can result in a lot of kind of interesting ways to expose data. But, when you're looking at longer time ranges, sometimes it's fun to take a table graph like this, and instead of looking at the rate, I might want to say, what is the total number of unique destination IP addresses a particular source communicated to over, or all of my sources communicated to over some period of time? And then I can do, a query like this. Also, just because we have a little bit of time, but I guess looking for the, if there's any other questions, just feel free to drop them in here for the people supporting me. I'll answer those. But just right off the bat, right, if you look at this query, like if you were to do this in your Kentik, like you can see something is going on with this host. Like that's a lot of unique source IP, destination IPs for this to communicate with, where it's way off the baseline of everybody else. So, part of the pulling apart of data using metrics can really give you some interesting ways to slice and dice traffic and find abnormalities in the data set, that kind of thing. I also, this is just as I'm filibustering a little bit and talking about things I find very interesting. I find this a really cool thing to do with firewalls where a lot of firewalls will give you, we'll go by, let's just go by bits. I'll pick on Palo, but this is going to be true for other firewall vendors. Well, they'll give you a firewall event in the flow record. So this is going into the weeds a little bit, but this is supposed to be unlocking the power of Data Explorer. So you're typically going to get, a flow created event when something starts, an update event if it, continues over 60 seconds, a deleted event when it ends, and then a lot of firewalls will give you the denied event, so traffic that's being blocked by the firewall. And I'm just going to add this as a filter, right? And apply this filter. Where I'm saying, give me all my Palo Alto traffic back, group it together by denied event, where the event is denied. So I have a single row. And what I like to do with this is take it by source and destination IP address. Maybe we'll put in the ports just to kind of show my source port to mix it up a little bit. And then the metric I might select for this, instead of bits or total bytes, I might want to know the number of unique connections or flows that are getting denied. And this can kind of also give you, I'll tell you, I'll run this with customers, and there's always like that one syslog server that everybody forgot about that is just getting pummeled with syslog all day, every day, and it's getting blocked by a particular firewall, right? Something along those lines. So here, just removing port, we get a lot of cardinality, right? So you can see this IP address is trying over and over to get to Google. If we remove port, and then kind of look at just the connections here, it gives you kind of a clear view using the total metric as like what is getting blocked the most by a particular firewall. All is to say, utilizing metrics, and you can see by and large, this guy doing DNS lookups here is getting blocked. Using dimensions in creative ways and using filters in creative ways really lets you, unlock the power of Data Explorer and mess with your data in a variety of different ways. And of course, at Kentik, we're always happy to go through different examples and show you how to use this. And that's really the purpose of this Kentik in Motion thing. So I don't think there are any other questions. I'm going to hang out here for just a little bit longer, but I hope you enjoyed the presentation. We made it just about 40 minutes. And again, this was Kentik in Motion, unlocking the power of Data Explorer. I'll stop sharing now and hang out for other questions.